Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 23 of our reading of Pandora's Genes. It is a novel by Kathryn Lance, and the first book of a trilogy, the Pandora trilogy, with the second book being Pandora's Children, and the third book being Pandora's Promise. These books are still for sale at major retailers, so make sure you pick up your own copy. Also, we're going to go over the copyright information, which is it's copyright 1985 with all rights reserved. And I have the author's written permission to read this book on my YouTube channel. Now, in the last part, Zach managed to escape from the traders and made his way back to the capital. And he is now visiting with his brother, the principal. And I guess that we will just go from things. We'll go from there. Okay. Are you all right? The principal touched Zach's shoulder, his face very close and worried. Zach nodded and swallowed several times as the principal continued. When I saw that, I had to believe that you were dead. It never occurred to me that the seal ring could have found itself on any finger but yours. I suppose I didn't think it was possible for you to be captured. And, of course, for a long time now, the traders have not taken male prisoners. Zach nodded. He wanted to tell the principal about Yash and the traders' plan for secret conversion, but he must explain a great deal more first. Part of that explanation would involve telling the principal how he had betrayed him and why, and he could not bring himself to do that yet. He again fell silent, knowing that Will would attribute this to exhaustion. In his happiness, the principal seemed not to even notice Zach's silence. Zach basked in his brother's joy, unwilling to spoil it for now. The principal talked on and on. He told Zach of new developments in the district, of his struggle against the traders, and Zach listened with growing misgiving. Will still saw the traders as crazed, ignorant fanatics, which of course they were, but clearly Will had no idea how dedicated and well organized they were. As always, Zach loved to watch the principal talk, his face animated and expressive as he described all things which excited him. Even as a young boy, he had never been able to sit quietly. Always his mind was working, making plans, dreaming dreams. After a while, Zach's head began to nod, and he fought his sleepiness, not wanting the evening to end. The principal saw his exhaustion and called Robin, then ordered him to have the housekeeper prepare a bath. He put his strong arms around Zach's own and helped him rise from the couch, then walked through the long corridor and down the stairs to the large bathing pool in the basement. You are so thin, I can feel your bones, the principal said. The bathing room was already hazy with steam as two servants poured kettles of hot water into a large blue and white tiled bath. Zach was suddenly acutely embarrassed by the filth, his parasites, and the new scars crossing his scrawny body. The principal seemed to sense the discomfort and instructed the attendants to leave after the bath was filled and thick towels laid out. He helped Zach peel off the filthy clothes and eased him into the pool, disrobed, and joined him, lying back in the warm, fragrant water. After a few moments, the warmth of the water had reached into every corner of Zach's being, and he felt that he could float here forever, never moving. The principal helped Zach to wash with soap and a rough vegetable sponge, clucking at the amount of grime that had worked itself into all the pores and folds of his skin. This was the first time he had properly bathed in over 5 years, and Zach simply gave himself up to the pleasure of it, feeling the torments of the past years melt away with the dirt. We'll have to do something about your new friends, said the principal distastefully. You may have to finally shave that famous beard. Soon you'll be more like me than you ever imagined. He turned his head sideways. Yes, you're beginning to look like Zach, he said. How do you feel? Oh. Um, in answer, Zach reached out and gripped his brother's hand, slippery with soap. The principal returned the grasp and smiled. It's a start, he said, feeling more relaxed and at peace than he could recall ever having felt. Zach wrapped himself in a soft cloth robe and followed the principal to his old room, where he had not slept in all those years. I kept the room for you, said the principal. I don't want anyone else to sleep here. Some part of me must have known you were still alive. Zach lay down on the clean bed sheets, tightly spread over mount a mount hair mattress, feeling as if his body had melted and were spreading into every corner of the room. He was very near sleep, and he looked up again at Will's confident smile. The last thing he saw as his eyes closed was his feathered lyre hanging on the wall where he had always kept it. Chapter 7. When Zach awoke, it was late afternoon. He had slept nearly round the clock. He lay without moving for a moment, savoring the feel of peace and comfort. Through the open window, he could see the top of the great tower, and beyond it the trees bordering the river. Slowly he stretched, working out the stiffness of his limbs. The feathered lyre gleamed on the wall in front of him, and he smiled, thinking of the principal's sentimental dedication to his memory. He knew he should get up, but his body still ached from exhaustion. Despite the exercise he had taken in his cell, he was weak and out of shape. He could see that he was unable to resume any of his duties until he had began to rebuild his strength. And then he remembered that he would not, in fact, assume any duties because he had committed treason and would be put to death. No matter how much Will loved him, Zach knew he would never be able to forgive his betrayal. He sat up, but still did not get out of bed. He scratched his beard and hair, thinking of all he must do today. "Good morning, sir," said a voice to his right. Zach started and turned to see a boy slouched in a chair, gazing at him curiously. "I am Lindy," the boy said. "The principal ordered me to watch and tell him as soon as you woke up, and to find out if you want anything." "Nothing, thank you," said Zach, smiling. The boy bobbed his head and disappeared. Zach went to the wardrobe, where he knew he would find his old clothes untouched. He put on a soft gray tunic, which had been one of his favorites. It hung from him as if from a cloak rack. The belt he used to fasten his dark trousers reached nearly twice around him. There was a small looking glass to the right of the bed, although Zach had caught blurred glimpses of himself in water while traversing in the garden. He had not yet had a clear look at the man he had become. He approached the mirror with curiosity and misgiving, although he often teased the principal for his vanity. Zach had always taken pride in his own appearance. The man who looked out from the mirror was a stranger. The hair was thin and matted, and more gray than blonde. His face was gaunt and deeply lined, his eyes sunken and without a trace of humor. He looked, in fact, very much like most traders. Perhaps the teachings had rubbed off on him in some deep and unknowable way. There was a knock at the door, and the principal let himself in. He was smiling and full of energy as a puppy. Immediately he embraced Zach. "Good morning, brother," he said, although by now good evening would have been more appropriate. "I take it you slept well." "Better than I have in 5 years," said Zach. The principal stood back and examined him. "Quite a change from the wide-eyed trader who came in yesterday. But we've got to fatten you up and do something about that hair. Do you know your hair your hair was so dirty I didn't notice it last night. But you've gone quite gray." "I was just noticing that myself," said Zach. "People will now take me for your father." The principal put his arm around Zach's shoulder. Come along then, old man. Let's get some food into you, and then off to the barber's." The barber did not shave Zach's head, but cut the hair briskly short and applied herbal medicine to kill the remaining lice. His beard was shaved. This was the first time in his adult life that Zach had seen himself without it. Finally, you look like a civilized man, said the principal. He had been trying to get Zach to shave from their youth. I look like a stranger, said Zach. This new appearance was even more unsettling. The deep lines around his mouth and the mouth itself, straight and thin-lipped, reinforced the look of a man who was humorless and uncompromising. It was the face of a betrayer. Had he always looked like this? I planned a feast for tonight, said the principal. A chance for all your old friends to see you again. I've been spreading the word all day. I'll tell you something, Zach. I feel like a boy again. It's as if I came back from the dead too. I did more business this one day than in the last 2 months. He looked closely at Zach and frowned. What is this? I thought you'd want to see everyone. If it's too much for you, we can postpone the celebration. Zach saw the hurt in the principal's eyes and quickly said, No, of course not. It sounds like just what I need. But the longer he was with the principal, the closer he came to resuming his old life, the more difficult it would be for Will when he finally learned the truth. I have to speak with you, Zach said after a moment. Yes, of course, said the principal. And there are 100 questions I must ask you. But there's no rush. Some of what I have to tell you is urgent, more than you know. I learned a great deal about the traders and their ways. The principal nodded. I executed their leader here last spring, but it didn't seem to have stopped the spread of their ideas. They've made him a holy martyr, said Zach. Stopping them is going to require all your resources. They have the power to destroy your civilization. I'm deadly serious about this. I can see you are, and I know we'll have to do something about it soon. Great Dina. I just hope we're not going to have a holy war on our hands. I'm afraid that's exactly what you have already. The principal looked worried and then shook his head and smiled. Together we can stop them, he said. Together we can do anything, Zach. I've always known that, but there's plenty of time, even if the traders are converting half the city at this very moment. We can't do a thing about it tonight. So let's forget about business and concentrate on pleasure for a while. When you've eaten and drunk enough to put 10 more pounds on your bony frame, then we'll get to work. Zach had to smile. The principal was making things more difficult by the minute, but Zach couldn't help going along with him for the time being. You win, he said, as always, but one thing, I know you have moved the garden. I assume it's now at the peninsula retreat? The principal nodded. The neck of the peninsula is guarded by a training base. It couldn't be safer. How is the work going there? Better than we could have expected. As a matter of fact, the problem of women's sickness has been solved. What? Well, that is, there is now a way to test for susceptibility. We've had some difficulty getting the population to go along with it. I've sent for someone who can tell you all about it tomorrow. There was one more question Zach had to ask. One thing more. Is the old woman, she's dead. It happened a few weeks ago. She had been ill a long time. She squeezed Zach's shoulder. If only I had come back in time. She believed you dead, Zach, but if you had returned, the shock might have killed her sooner. Zach was astonished. He was saddened by the news of his mother's death, but not really surprised. She had been very old. What stunned him was that Will seemed to share some measure of sorrow. Had you grown closer then, toward the end? The principal laughed shortly. Not really, he said. Had there been... Okay, sorry, lost my place. The principal laughed shortly. Not really, he said. There was never any love between the old woman and me. It's just that we both came to understand we've been working for the same thing all along. Zach smiled. All my life I tried to convince you of that, both of you. I guess we were too much alike to listen to you, the principal said. He frowned, then went on. At the end, she called me to her deathbed. It turned out she wanted to put forth another of your old projects. The gist of it was that it's time for me to settle down and produce an heir. Zach stared at Will. Things must have changed more than he could imagine. The old woman he had known would rather have seen Will's empire crumble than have him marry. And Will himself? Well, Will was on his feet. It's getting late, he said. There's all the time in the world to talk about this. For now, we have to have a great deal of serious eating and drinking ahead of us, so no more business and no more questions. Agreed? Agreed. By the way, the principal added, stopping so suddenly that Zach nearly bumped into him, I have a question too, brother, and I'm expecting the answer to one of them tomorrow. For an eerie moment, Zach had the feeling that Will already knew everything, but the principal's face immediately relaxed into a smile of anticipation as they approached the banquet hall. Zach, sorry, Zach awoke the next morning with a taste in his mouth like poisoned bat wings and a fierce throbbing headache. For a moment, he thought he was back in prison and opened his eyes, expecting to see damp stone walls. Instead, he saw curved wooden panels and glass paned windows, framing an overcast sky. He couldn't think where he was, then realized that he was lying on a couch in the principal's office, where he dimly remembered coming after the banquet. The principal himself was sprawled across his desk, snoring loudly. Curled against his ankle, its face buried in his paws, was a striped fox cat baby the principal called Napoleon. When Will had first shown him the animal, Zach had been astounded, both at the thought of a fox cat living tamely indoors and at the idea of Will taking on the care of a pet. At the feast last night, though, he could see that Napoleon suited Will's playful side as it scampered about the room, chasing stray morsels of food and attacking unguarded ankles. Watching Will with the animal, Zach again had the feeling that Will had changed in ways beyond his understanding. It had been a wonderful party, taking Zach back in memory to the early days of Will's rule. With optimism and youthful exuberance, he made every victory a cause for excitement and celebration. In those days, Will had given banquets often, sparing no expense in honoring an achievement in battle or the consolidation of some new service for the growing district, like the first founding of a school for literacy. Though Zach had never been as gregarious as Will, he had always enjoyed the chance to talk, joke, and sing with Will's generals, soldiers, healers, and teachers. The formal occasion for banquets had grown fewer over the years, but Will had never lost his delight in playing the host, laughing and drinking with his men as if he were one of them and not the principal. Give me just a sec. Okay. The banquet was held in the large dining hall that the principal used for festive occasions. Its faded blue walls and carpet were illuminated by dozens of fish oil lamps hanging from brass fixtures in the walls. Two long, beautiful, polished, pre-changed tables were covered with embroidered cotton cloth, and set with bowls of flowers, dining implements, and pitchers of wine and brew. Women for hire and serving boys circulated with trays of cheese, bread, fruit, and meats, while a musician played ballads on a piano that was said to be hundreds of years old. At first, Zach had felt shy and somewhat intimidated by the crowd of noisy, boisterous men, many of whom he had never before seen, but after the principal had pressed on him several cups of new grape wine, he had begun to relax and then to enjoy himself. Ralph, Red, and a dozen others had repeatedly taken his hand or embraced him, some of them sentimental from drink, and all genuinely glad to see him. He had never considered how many people had missed him and how much he had missed them. He had taken a great deal of ribbing about his clean-shaven face and short gray hair. There had been much drunken laughter and song. In fact, they had all behaved and felt like small children, which of course was the point. Last night, the principal had seemed happier and less driven than Zach had ever seen him. That happiness would have to end soon. Today, Zach couldn't put off any longer. He pulled himself to his feet and stretched, thinking that he desperately needed some water. Then he noticed that someone Probably the ever-thoughtful Robin had placed a tray containing a large pitcher of water and another of fruit juice just inside the door. The baby fox cat opened his eyes and stretched, then jumped off the desk and rubbed at Zach's ankles, asking to be let out with a plaintive meow. Smiling, Zach quietly opened the door, then picked up the tray. He heard a groan as he finished the second cup of juice, so he poured another and brought it to the principal. "Great, Dina," said the principal. "I feel as if I've been dead for a week." "You look it too," said Zach. He handed him the juice. The principal drank it in one long swallow, then hopped up and began to gulp from the water pitcher. When he had finished, he upended the pitcher and poured the remaining water over his head. He shook his head like a wet mount, then smiled sheepishly. "A little better," he said. "Some party, eh?" "Thank you," said Zach. "No thanks required. Loosen up a little, like you did last night. I never heard you sing so well, or so loudly. Did the traders teach you to warble like that?" "As a matter of fact, in a way they did," said Zach. "You could have a new career as a minstrel, though I have no intention of letting you leave my side again. Perhaps we'll just invite selected patrons to hear you and fatten the tax rolls." He stopped, and then there was a knock on the door. "Ah," he said. "Yes?" Robin stuck his head in. "Good morning. The women from the garden are here, sir." "Good. Make them comfortable. Zach and I are going to my private quarters to bathe and change. Have breakfast sent to us there." He turned to Zach and added, "If your stomach feels anything like mine, breakfast isn't an appealing thought, but I insist on it. We'll get some meat back on you yet. Then afterwards, there's someone I want you to meet." As Zach waited in the principal's office for the principal to return with the emissary from the garden, he tried to puzzle out Will's strange manner. He had hinted more than once that he wanted to question Zach about matters that were obviously troubling him. He knew that Zach had a great deal to tell him about the traders, yet he was taking as the first order of business a meeting with a representative of the garden. Most likely, Zach decided, this was simply a courtesy. The principal knew how deeply interested Zach had always been in the garden's work, and perhaps, too, he wanted to show off the latest developments. He heard the principal's voice in the hall. "I'm sorry if I alarmed you. I wouldn't have sent for you if it weren't very important. I'll explain everything later, but now I want you to meet someone." The principal preceded his guest into the room and turned, watching as she walked in. His face was expressionless. Zach followed his eyes to the door. Zach knew her immediately, although she had grown. She was a grown woman now and taller, but the same grace and beauty, the same astonishing plum-colored eyes gave Evie the charismatic presence she had possessed as a young girl. His mind swirled with 100 thoughts, surprise, shock, and she was here with the principal, and the joy at seeing her alive and unharmed. He half rose from the couch, holding his breath. It took Evie a moment longer to recognize Zach, and at first she looked simply puzzled. She glanced quizzically at the principal, whose face was now fixed on Zach, then again at Zach, and suddenly she became absolutely motionless. Her mouth parted and the color drained from her face. "Zach," she whispered. She took 2 uncertain steps towards him, then abruptly sat in the nearby armchair staring at him. "Evie," said the principal, "this is my brother Zach." "Zach." Zach sat back. "I know her," he said. The principal leaned against the desk, his arms crossed carelessly in front of him. "Yes," he said. "I can see you do, and I suspected as much." Zach sank into the cushions and forced himself to look at his brother. The rage he had been expecting was absent. In its place was a look of bewilderment and something else. Zach realized it was sadness, which colored Will's voice when he spoke. "Very well," he said. "Now it's time for me to ask questions. I've long suspected that you were captured while you were defending her, but now I want to know how it happened. How did Evie get to the garden, and why did she never tell me who she was? What really happened 5 years ago?" Chapter 8. As he lay awake that night, Zach reflected that it had been the most painful afternoon of his life. Not without his... Never would he forget the puzzled, trusting look on the principal's face when he had to answer. "I was not defending Evie when I was captured. I was taking her to the garden. Zach, no, said Evie, but he went on. I betrayed you, Will. This is what I have been trying to tell you. Betrayed me? The principal looked bewildered. What are you talking about? For a moment, Zach thought he might yet take back his words, but it was too late. The principal's face began to change with understanding. And Zach continued, I did not intend to bring Evie to you, he said. Not then and not ever. The principal continued to look at Zach, not moving. Then he swallowed and turned away. He walked to the window and stood with his back to the room, looking out at the clouded sky. Zach watched him helplessly, then turned to meet Evie's gaze. But she too turned away, and he felt suddenly alone in the room. He was dizzy, as if he were imagining or dreaming everything that had happened. The principal continued to stand with his back to them, and Zach could see his shoulders move as he took deep, slow breaths. He had done this since he was a child. Whenever he was hurt or challenged, he had once told Zach that it calmed him and gave him time to decide what action to take. We are out of time for this. So we have been reading from Pandora's Genes. It is a book by Kathryn Lance, and it is the first book of a trilogy, the second book being Pandora's Children, and the third book being Pandora's Promise. These books are all available for purchase at most book retailers, if they're big. And so, yeah, if you want to pick up your own copy, then that's up to you. Also, I want to thank Kathryn Lance for allowing me the privilege of reading this book on my channel. I think that it's a story that's still really prominent today. Even though this was written back in 1985, this still would fit in today's society just fine. Anyways, with all that being said, thanks for if you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe, ring that bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me anyway, all the information will be in the description below. Also, if you want to join the Discord server, all that information will be down there as well. And I believe that's all. Thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.